I'll pay attention. So I'm Director of Online Dispute Resolution at eBay and PayPal. So I started out at eBay. I spent about 2 years there and built several dispute resolution mechanisms on eBay. How many people here have bought something on eBay? Bless you. Bless all of you. You're paying for my children's orthodonture, and I very much appreciate that. But after about 2 years at eBay, I shifted over to PayPal. How many people have paid someone with PayPal? I love it. At the forum last year in Cairo, it was very interesting. I got up and I said, my name's Colin Rule and I work at eBay. And a lot of the people went, eBay? What's eBay? Because I guess there is no eBay in Cairo. So the session became a whole presentation on this is what eBay is. And people go, oh, that's fascinating. Wow, an online marketplace. So it's nice to know in this room, we pretty much got a good handle around exactly what eBay is and what PayPal is. But the real reason why I shifted from eBay to PayPal has to do with enforcement. PayPal is a payments company, so PayPal can move money around. And I've spent the last 2 years building dispute resolution systems at PayPal. So when I was asked to talk about what opportunities exist in ODR, I appreciate IO's flexibility. I sort of unilaterally expanded the focus of my presentation from just financial areas to other areas as well. But I wanted to begin with sort of a discussion of the traditional areas of ODR. Because now we're talking about a field that we're not in our infancy anymore. I would say we're probably toddlers. I don't know, Ethan, what would you say? Toddling around. Isaac is somewhere in the audience. I think he could probably vouch for that, right, in the baby norm. But so we focused on a couple different areas. And the first, obviously, was domain names. We have Frank here from ICANN somewhere. Yeah, up there. So domain names really, and the UDRP was the first big international ODR application. We also have Charlie here from CyberSettle, who really pioneered ODR in the insurance sector. And he's going to be showing off some of his latest tools as CyberSettles continue to evolve. I know the next panel is going to be focusing on legal cases, and we have a lot of legal experts in the room. And when I talk about legal cases, I think that's the more traditional field for alternative dispute resolution. Everything from family to landlord-tenant to small claims to intellectual property to workplace issues. And that's familiar ground for most of us in the face-to-face dispute resolution field, so it's natural that we would focus on that in ODR as well. And then, of course, eBay. eBay, based on Ethan's pilot, which turned into a company called SquareTrade, eBay has done now, through SquareTrade, more than 3 million disputes, but eBay itself does more than 35 million disputes a year now around the world in 16 different languages. So these are the traditional areas we've focused on, and I think these are vibrant areas with a lot of innovation occurring. But I think the topic for our presentation today is sort of what are some new areas that ODR can move into. And I wanted to speak about 3 areas that I have some personal experience with. The first is payments. And this is an area of interest of me, not only because I'm now at PayPal, which is a payments company, even though we are connected to an online marketplace, but because I've learned a lot about how payments stretches far beyond even the parameters of my company, PayPal. And I want to talk about some of the opportunity that exists in the ODR field in the payments sector. The second is customer support. And this is broadly defined. And I'll lay out the parameters of exactly how I think about that opportunity for us. And the last is online social conflict. Because I do think that much of us, I think ODR within the alternative dispute resolution field, particularly in the United States, is distinguished by a pedigree of being proven in the marketplace. Online dispute resolution is considered a private initiative primarily. We don't have a lot of nonprofit or social good-oriented ODR companies. Now, I don't mean to rule out some of the great work done by Sanjana and people who are doing peacemaking and some very interesting applications of ODR technology. But the vast majority of the innovation in the ODR field has occurred in for-profit sectors. So online social conflict, I think, is interesting because there is a lot of opportunity for us in the ODR field in what I would consider a non-profit area. So I want to definitely address that because it's a hot topic right today. So let's just dive in. If you have any questions for me, too, please don't hesitate to. And I didn't realize I had an animation on here, so forgive my little fading in. But payments is the first area that I'd like to talk about. Now, payments, when we think narrowly about payments, at least at eBay, we think about buyers and sellers trying to send money to each other. But really, payments is any situation where you use a check, where you use cash, where you use a money order, where you use a credit card. Really, these payments are the core elements of all commerce around the world. And payments writ large is a very vibrant area for disputes. In many senses, I think online dispute resolution as a field emerged when commerce came onto the internet. I was on the internet from even before it was the internet. I see Jim Malamed is up there, and Jim and I were involved with ConflictNet back in the United States in the mid '80s, and this was before there was any internet. It was all dial-up, green screen, just characters, no pretty pictures at all. But there was definitely conflict on those online networks, those dial-up networks. But it wasn't really that online dispute resolution emerged as a discipline until the mid-'90s, when really the internet was applied to commerce and money started to be an element in the disputes that were occurring. So I really feel like money is the key thing that transforms online conflict from an annoyance into something that requires the deliberate construction of redress mechanisms. So one of the advantages of getting into the payment sector from an online dispute resolution perspective is case volumes. I mean, when we talk about the volumes at eBay and PayPal, sometimes it makes my head spin when I think about 35 million disputes a year. It's very difficult to conceive of that much volume happening. The numbers start to become some sort of meaningless. But it's funny because lots of people are joining PayPal now from Visa or from MasterCard or from Citibank. And when they talk about volumes, they think PayPal is a drop in the water. When you look at the global marketplace, the volumes of transactions that are occurring, it's overwhelming to think about how many disputes are emerging and how few of those disputes are actually being provided redress mechanisms that are valuable to those parties. The other thing that's powerful in the payments world is enforceability. And that was the real shift. I think I mentioned this before. When I came from eBay to PayPal, at eBay, we had a very facilitative approach to online dispute resolution. So we would say to the parties, try and talk it out, work it out. If you can't work it out, come to eBay, and then eBay may protect you if we feel like you've been taken advantage of. We didn't have the ability to move money from one party to the other. The beauty of PayPal is that PayPal does have access to the funds. When a buyer or a complainant reports a problem, we can lock down the funds in question and then make a decision about the appropriate owner of those funds and move those funds unilaterally. If you look at all of the successful online dispute resolution mechanisms around the world, the key common denominator, it seems to me, is enforceability. Look at domain names. ICANN controls the database. The outcome of a UDRP process can be immediately executed by ICANN. So that's one of the reasons why it's proven to be robust. So enforceability is a key element of payments. There are inefficient existing redress paths, and I'm going to talk a bit about the chargebacks mechanism that's currently used within credit cards. But the existing redress options that are available to buyers and sellers are universally acknowledged to be insufficient for the complexity of transactions that are occurring. And also, there's lots of money in this area. We're not talking about millions or billions of dollars. We're talking about trillions of dollars. And that's very, very important for us in a field where innovation is fueled by investment. We need to go into sectors where that investment exists. Now, the disadvantages is often these things are so automated, there's so much volume that the transactions are very rule-based, and that makes it difficult to innovate and come in with a lot of flexible dispute resolution approaches. And also, many of the transactions are low dollar value compared to high-value civil litigation, for instance. But let's dive in. Let's talk about the opportunity here. Now, my company, PayPal, the total payments volume that we do at PayPal is about $30 billion a year, which sounds like a lot of money to us. eBay, which we consider our big brother, does about $50 billion of total transaction volume within a year. Now, $50 billion, eBay does more volume on the daily basis than the NASDAQ, which is the U.S. technology stock exchange. So we're talking about a lot of volume. We're talking about low dollar value transactions. Now, if you look at the entire pool of U.S. e-commerce, which is a large pool and growing rapidly, we talked a lot about how online dispute resolution can focus on online-only disputes. Well, that really resides within that $250 billion bucket. And then global e-commerce is about twice that size, $500 billion. But the vast majority of the high growth in global e-commerce is occurring outside the United States. As I think Day One mentioned in his remarks, a lot of that is happening in Asia. It's happening in China right now. But the real opportunity resides here. And this is in, if you look at Visa, the Visa network, we're talking about $4 trillion worth of payment volumes on a global basis. Now, Visa is a network. It is almost a protocol, in a sense. All of the organizations that are engaging in this transaction volume are the banks, the card issuers, and Visa actually has a lot of blue sky to grow into as well. There are many areas of the world where credit cards are not the current transaction default. But if you think about that $4 trillion pool of transactions, the dispute redress mechanisms that are made available to those buyers and sellers are extremely inadequate for the types of matters that are going to be occurring on an ongoing basis. So that's the opportunity that I think we should target. Now, if you look at the existing credit card payment flows, the way credit card payments occur is that the card owner authorizes a charge through their card issuer, and then through the card networks, the money is deducted or given to the merchant through their acquirer. And I don't want to get too much into the infrastructure behind this, but the key point that I would like to make, and a chargeback situation is where the buyer says, I never received the item that I paid for, or the item that I received was inadequate, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or I never made this payment. So you have non-receipt, you have item not as described, or you have unauthorized payment. And once they make that statement, there is a mechanism called a chargeback where the money can be taken from the merchant through the card associations and given back to the buyer. And then there's a process, essentially, of representment and disputing to try and figure out who's in the right, the buyer or the merchant. Now, you're dealing about, this is a game of telephone. The buyer and the merchant only communicate at the point of transaction. The card issuer has no relationship with the merchant. And the acquirer, the merchant bank that provides those merchant services to the merchant, has no relationship with the buyer. So it all happens through this very ornate international network. And everyone there's little fees all the way along, tiny, tiny little fees. So the point is, chargebacks are the existing redress path, and they're also incredibly unfavorable to merchants. Merchants are often required to put a large deposit down, and anytime a buyer has any problem at all, the money is deducted immediately from the merchant. And then the onus is put back on the merchant to prove that the buyer is not engaged in some sort of fraud. Now, if you look at this network, disputes exist everywhere through this network. At every communication point, there are different types of disputes that can arise. You can see between the merchant and the acquirer and the card association, there can be disputes over rate changes, over risk fees that are charged if the merchant is deemed to be high risk. If the merchant is selling items that have a lot of on-off chargebacks where the buyers say, wait a minute, that wasn't my card, I never made that purchase. Well, then fees can be increased for the merchant. If you look at the card association and issuer, there's actually an arbitration mechanism that's put in place to resolve disputes that exist between those two institutions in the transaction chain. And a lot of disputes exist there. However, it's very inefficient, and it's not online enabled at all. And then obviously there are a lot of disputes that arise between buyers and card issuers. Maybe if the buyer misses a payment, they're put on a payment plan. They need to renegotiate the debt that's built up with their card issuer. There are a lot of card issuers that have usurious rates that they charge their buyers. So I'm just saying, in this entire payment chain, there are rich opportunities for disputes that need to be addressed. And we as an ODR field have not begun to mine these possibilities very well at all. I think that we've been focusing on our traditional areas of dominance, and we haven't explored this particular area. And I'm only referring right now to credit card chargebacks. Obviously, there are many other payment types. What actually is happening is because credit cards have so many built-in costs, it's very difficult for credit cards to compete with some of the new payment types that are emerging. For instance, bank-to-bank transfers like ACH payments or direct debits. I know in Germany there are very easy online bank-to-bank transfers called ELVs, which are essentially provided at no cost. It's very difficult for credit cards to compete in that area. In the United States, we're creating what we call pinless debit, which is an opportunity to do bank-to-bank transfers without using a PIN. So it works like a credit card. RFID, where people put radio frequency devices in a watch or a keychain, and they can swipe it when they go to the store, and they can pay that way. Mobile payments, where I know in Sweden sometimes, or Finland, you can buy a soda with your mobile phone. You go up to the soda machine and you dial a number, and then the soda comes out of the machine, and it's on your mobile bill. So we also talk about biometrics, where people pay with fingerprints. This is a vibrant area, and we are really on the cusp of a lot of innovation here. And the point is, redress must be provided in all of these mechanisms, all of these payment mechanisms. And chargebacks, which are incredibly inefficient, at least is a clear redress path. But these payment mechanisms have no chargeback process. There are no redress mechanisms that are provided on a network-wide basis for these categories. So it is a huge opportunity for those of us in the ODR field to step up and to say, if you want to emerge with a new redress, a new payments process, you must provide redress for that to be trustworthy for buyers and sellers. And we are the people who can provide that network. And the only way that you can design a network that's flexible enough to match the needs of these payment types is to use online dispute resolution technology. So, I don't mean to be a cheerleader here, and I'm happy to talk in further detail about it. We have other panelists. I also want to note that there are other types of financial disputes, many of which, again, they have global reach. If you talk about banks and account holders, online banks like ING, you talk about lenders and borrowers. We have a whole crisis in the United States now, with a mortgage crisis, where a lot of people are no longer able to pay their mortgages. So we have many, many disputes. 5 minutes? Are you kidding me? You're breaking my heart. All right, I'm going to go faster. Boards and shareholders, fund managers and investors. Obviously, the National Association for Security Dealers in the United States has a dispute resolution mechanism that they use to deal with investment banks and shareholders. So I guess the point that I would like to make is that we as a field need to explore this area of opportunity. We have not done a good enough job learning about this, and I've been learning about it from the PayPal perspective, but I encourage all of you ODR providers to learn more about this niche, because I think it is a very vibrant area for us. All right, I only have 5 minutes, so let me charge ahead as well. Oh, this fade thing is going to kill me here. I should have reviewed my animations. The second thing I'd like to talk about, and I will do so very briefly, considering how much time I have left, is customer service. Now, when we think about customer service, we often think about, okay, I bought an airline ticket, the airline ticket arrives, it has the wrong name on it, what do I do? I call some phone number, I get some random person on the other side who needs to help me out. Now, customer service is not traditionally considered a dispute area. The frame that most companies think about when they think about customer service is not disputes. They think about it in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of contact rates. But we're talking about massive case volumes, there's a ton of money associated with this niche, and there's also liability questions, which make it a very attractive niche for dispute resolution to penetrate. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the disadvantages, but obviously you're usually talking about mediating between a company and their customer. And there's a real information and power imbalance there, so that's something we need to be cognizant of. But this is a very well-established category. Customer service is, again, a huge and vibrant industry. It's not as large as the payments industry, but there are many different organizations that exist that help to facilitate and organize consortia of organizations that work in this space. This is a growing problem. Customer dissatisfaction is an issue around the world because as companies, for instance, eBay does not have a customer service phone number. We only have email because we have 240 million customers around the world. It's very difficult for us to consider a way where we could accept phone calls from all those people and deal with that volume. So I guess my admonition to all of you is that we should look into these types of industries that maintain large call centers, and try and help them reframe some of the services that they offer under customer service and think about them as dispute resolution. It's not necessarily that we need to all become call center agents with headsets on. But if you do, for instance, at PayPal, we have an extremely large call center. I know Mike and Ian and I were visiting the PayPal call center for Europe in Dublin just a couple days ago. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people who sit there with headsets helping people resolve their problems. The main team that exists in Dublin is called Resolution Services. But those people receive no dispute resolution training, and they don't think about what they're doing as problem resolution. They think about it as customer support. We in the ODR field must reach out to these industries to maintain these large call centers and help them reframe what it is that they do as problem resolution and then contribute our services to their efforts. All right, I'm going to just charge ahead here. The other thing that I would say is when we reach out to these organizations, we need to definitely talk about online dispute resolution from the standpoint of the merchant. When I first came to eBay, I thought dispute resolution was a self-evident good. But no. You need to talk about the dollars and cents. What eBay cares about is maintaining trust within the marketplace. Online dispute resolution can be a powerful mechanism for building trust between buyers and sellers. But if we talk about it just resolving disputes for resolving disputes' sake, that's not going to get any traction with these companies. And also, when we price these services, we've got to think about the value on a macro level, not case by case. So the value of long-term buyer retention needs to be factored into the price that they're willing to pay us for our services, as opposed to saying the value of this transaction is $70. So we're not going to pay more for dispute resolution in this case than $70. That's a box that we need to break out of. All right. I'll just mention a few things about the changing landscape in this space. There's some discussion about an EU regulation that would require all e-commerce companies to provide redress paths for their customers. That would be a huge opportunity for us in the online dispute resolution field. I think the idea of conditionally binding arbitration is very powerful in this category because it helps to deal with some of the power imbalances. And I think we need to work very hard to look at the pain points in this sector from the merchant's perspective. All right? And I'm just going to briefly say on this slide, I think we need to think not necessarily about us being the sole provider of dispute resolution services, ODR companies, ODR firms. I think we need to think about training these companies and helping them build dispute resolution capacities internally. We need to be the exception handler. So for an extremely difficult case, they can refer that to us. That's what we're looking to do with ADR Group, for instance, with eBay Europe. We're taking the difficult cases and referring them to an outside ODR provider. But on a daily, weekly basis, we need to have that capacity inside our own company. Okay. Let me just dive into the last area because I know I'm probably already over my time. Thank you for your indulgence, Io. But this was something that actually Jim Malamed and I had a conversation about this in advance of the conference, and so has Sanjana. Right now, on the blogosphere right now, the sort of the chattering class of the internet, there is a lot of discussion about civility and how a culture of meanness is appearing online. Now, I don't necessarily see this as a financial opportunity for the ODR field, but I feel very much that this is an opportunity for those of us in ODR to speak with a common voice. I won't go into some of these harassment situations. We can get detail on them later because we have several people on the panel. But a lot of the online interaction, maybe as a result of anonymity, maybe it's just a cultural norm that's emerging. There is a lot of anger. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the current tone of dialogue within the online interaction sector. And I'd say I can only characterize it primarily in the North American sense, but I think it's a global issue as well. So the question is, how can we promote online civility without engaging in censorship? And there has been a proposed code of conduct issued by Tim O'Reilly, who is a prominent blogger in the United States, to expand dialogue in a means that will promote this kind of civility and minimize the chance of these nasty disputes that are resulting in a lot of ill will. And there's discussion about seals, there's discussion about badges, there's a lot of resistance to some sort of outside enforcement. But I feel like we in the dispute resolution field have a real opportunity, on the online dispute resolution field, can speak with a common voice. And particularly right now, this is happening literally this week, there's some very, very high-profile conversations occurring about how can we promote civility online, how can we try to resolve some of these disputes that are occurring. And I think we need to think beyond the traditional mediation arbitration model into more of a facilitation moderation. So I'm going to go through these very quickly. But these are the different modules that are being proposed as a part of this online code. And I'm not going to go through this in much detail now, but I will say that as part of this gathering, I feel like we can speak with a common voice from our expertise, from our credibility, maybe from an understanding of the best practices that we've honed over the last 5-10 years. And I think that we could come up with a statement that would really resonate within the blogosphere. And maybe we wouldn't have to do it by consensus, but we could draft something jointly, maybe in one of our breakouts, and then we could, if you felt moved, we could put our names to it, and then we could submit this out into the blogosphere as a common statement. So I know Jim and I attended a conference in Keystone, Colorado, where there was a statement that emerged. It was a lot of mediation individuals, sort of leaders in the field. And that statement really, I felt, resonated throughout the field. And I think we as well, in this gathering, is an opportunity for us to generate a statement that could really play a significant role in this conversation and maybe raise the profile of online dispute resolution writ large. So, let me just go through this very quickly. Io, I very much appreciate it. Jeff and Orna, I owe you a drink. But I think that we as a field, David Mack's a good friend of mine in dispute resolution in the United States. He says we've got to go where the disputes are. We can't wish online dispute resolution into existence in sectors where it's not desired or needed. We as a field need to find the heat, find where the need is, and we need to go and meet that need. So we need to insist on sustainability. We need to have firm business plans. We need to focus on areas where the funds exist. We need to maintain a high profile. That's part of what I was talking about in terms of the social conflict. And we need to integrate ourselves as much as possible. This kind of outsider model where we create these ODR companies that are generalists and we expect people to knock down our door asking for our help, it's not the future of ODR. We need to go to the sectors. We need to integrate ourselves. I think Charlie and CyberSettle have done an excellent job providing a model of how you can do that in an industry sector. And then I think that's really the route for us to deliver on the promise of this field most aggressively in the coming years. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.